Hello, my name is Stacy from the website trulymajestic.com, and World of Wool has asked me to do a tutorial for you guys on how to make this blanket. And of course I said yes, since I love their wool. Now, something unique about this blanket is, at first sight, it looks very narrow, but this type of design is actually so stretchy, it almost doubles when you stand up and stretch it this way. So, another thing about this design is I've actually made the front of it very puffy, and the back of it, if you flip it around and have a look, is very narrow. These stitches are not puffy, they're very felted. These ones are felted as well, but they're felted and fluffed, and I'll teach you how to do that at the end of this tutorial. Keep watching. So what we're going to first do, I need to show you the difference between merino wool roving and felted merino wool roving. Don't know if you can see that. This one is very wide and flat, and it absolutely just sheds and falls off and gets stuck on everything. You don't want to arm it with this. It will pull apart, it will break. Blankets are big, billowy, and beautiful, but they won't last, and they'll really get destroyed over the amount of use you do with them. So this is felted merino wool roving, and I'll show you how to do that. It makes it super strong. It's not as puffy, but it can be washed, and this is exactly what you want for a blanket to last for years and years and years. Okay, the first step, we are going to cast on as many stitches as we think we want our blanket to be wide. So however long you make this first cast on row is how wide your blanket will end up being. We want to tie a simple slip knot. And you can leave a tail like this, we'll weave it in at the end. So you want to put your arm through this, very simple. And then I'm going to grab this yarn and pull it through, and I have another loop here, and put my hand through and pull my yarn up, pull it through, another one. So we just keep doing that. Usually I cast on about 17 for a blanket the size I'm going to be making, but I want this one to be a bit wider and a bit more shallow. So I'm just going to actually not count and just go until I think I have the length that I want. So let me... Now, this is good. So if we pull this tight, I want you to notice that one side has this nice like V pattern. One side has this nice V pattern, and the other side has these kind of bumps. Let's move this out of the way. So bump, 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 bump. Now we're going to be working into the bumps next. So we want the end that we left the yarn on, that would be this end, and remember we want the bumpy side showing. So you can lay this flat on the floor if you want, or you can put it on a table, that's easier to work with, or you can keep it on your arms. So for this illustration, I'm just going to hold one side with my arm so you can see it, and this last stitch, we actually want to keep it and just pull it up at a 90-degree angle like this, and that becomes our first stitch of the next row that we're going to make, the first true row, not the cast on row. So I'm going to put my arm through this and find the next bump. So this is an original bump from this stitch. Now we need to go to this bump. And I want to take my yarn and just pull it directly through this bump, like this, and put it on my arm. Find the next bump, and pull my yarn through this bump. And you always put your arm from the back of the stitch, so the stitch that's towards me, to the front. So I have this many stitches on my arm. Now I want to count my stitches because I want an uneven number of stitches because I'm going to be knitting and purling. This is a pattern that's repeated every other stitch. So I want my pattern to be exactly the same on both edges, or else it'll be just slightly lopsided. Okay, so I need to pull one more through to make 19 stitches. Now, if I was good to have this many stitches, this was uneven, I would simply stop here and start knitting up. And this end part I would unravel and it would make it have a longer tail, and I would just weave it in at the end. But I need one more stitch, so I need to make that. Right. And that's all my stitches. Like I said, if you can't hold them on your arm, you can always put them down on the ground or the table and work from there. So the next thing that we are going to do is skip the first stitch. And this is called slipping. So we simply slip it off onto this arm. Now this one, we are going to be knitting one stitch, purling one, knitting one, purling one. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, I'll explain it. So when you knit a stitch, you always go from the back of the stitch. So this is the back, it's furthest away from me because these are facing me. So from the back of the stitch to the front. So I'm going to take this yarn and pull it from the back of this loop and pull it up to the front. This is a knit stitch. And then simply put it on my arm. Now the other one is going to be a purl stitch. So I want to put this yarn in front of me, next to me, and pull this yarn from the front of this stitch, from the front to the back. And that's a purl stitch. And then pop it onto my arm. So we knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. So we're going to knit one. That means the yarn goes through the back of this stitch and up. And then we are going to purl the next one. So the yarn goes to the front and we grab it and pull it through to the back. So let's do that all the way across. And sometimes your stitches will be twisted. You want to make sure they're open from this area. It shouldn't be a knotted mess here. It should be just open. So what did I do just last? I lost count. So this is going to be a knit stitch and a purl stitch and a knit stitch and a purl stitch Now the last stitch is special. We have it on our arm like this and we don't think about knitting or purling it. We just grab this yarn and just pull it straight through and then up. And that ends up making a nice kind of plait or braid up the side of our blanket. So it's really a nice finished off touch. And again, when we want to start the next row, we don't knit this stitch or purl it. We just simply slip it off onto our arm. And we do that for all rows all the way up. So I always want to start the first stitch, the first true stitch, with a knit stitch. So I go back to front, and then we go knit, purl. So I did a knit stitch there, I do a purl stitch here. Purl, knit, purl. And you can see the pattern starting to form usually after 4 rows or so. Your blanket should look something like this. I have just enough yarn for one last row, and that's going to be our cast off row, and then I'll show you how to fluff the stitches. Now to do a cast off row, we're going to first slip the first stitch like we always do, and then we're going to knit one. And then now we have these 2 stitches. We're going to take this back one and pull it over the front one and drop it off. So I have one left. Now I'm going to follow my pattern and do a purl stitch on this one. So we did a purl stitch, and now we just drop it off. So now I do my knit stitch, and you can just hang on to it. You don't have to put it all the way on your arm. So we hang on to that one, and we drop the back one off, and we continue this all the way to the end of the row. So I have a purl, and a knit, and a purl. Knit. Normally, I would not have this much weight on my arms. I would be sitting down on the couch doing this. But so you can see it a little bit better, I'm doing it this way. And then we have just this one stitch left. Now, with this last stitch, you can cut your yarn so you have a short tail, or you can take whatever remainder you have, which I'm going to do because this is my practice yarn and I don't want to cut it. You can just take it and pull it through this loop and then cinch it down nice and tight. And then this long tail, if it is this long, it's best to weave it into the side of your blanket, the longest edge. But if it's just really short, you can weave it in to the top row of your blanket. So to do weaving the tail in, you just simply kind of tuck it in here and there along the edges, and it just naturally blends in quite easily. So I'm not going to do the entire thing, but I'll do a little bit just to give you an idea of what it will look like. See, you can't even tell where it is. So our blanket is complete now, and it looks like this. Okay, it's time to fluff our blanket now, and we do that by pinching and pulling different directions until our stitch is nice and fluffy and has kind of a hollow core. Now this is completely felted merino wool, so even though I'm fluffing it, it is still felted and it still shouldn't shed. Now I'm only fluffing the top knit stitches of my blanket. I've chosen to left all the rest of them tightly felted to give it kind of a unique texture. As you can see, I've fluffed the first 3 stitches at the side of the blanket. They're really super puffy fluffy, and the rest are still tight. So let's see what the whole blanket will look like now. If you do make one of these blankets, or any arm knitted blankets, I would love to see it. Please join my Facebook group called Arm Knitting and Crocheting and show it off to the rest of us. We love encouraging each other and helping each other with our knitting projects. I'm Stacy from Truly Majestic. Have an awesome day.